I'm Mason, 33 years old, and a senior executive at a leading tech company in Seattle. Growing up, my parents were always supportive, but my sister Madison, that's a different story. Our rivalry took an unexpected turn when my family rejected me from attending my mom's birthday dinner. Why? To make room for Madison's new successful boyfriend. Little did they know success has many definitions. Before I dive into how my family went from treating me like the family failure to desperately seeking my forgiveness, take a second to let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see their faces when they realized who I really was. I grew up in suburban Chicago, in a typical middle-class neighborhood. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable with 4 bedrooms and a backyard where we'd have summer barbecues every weekend. My dad worked as an account manager at an insurance company, while my mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. They were hardworking people who believed in traditional values, especially when it came to education and career paths. During my early childhood, I had a close relationship with my parents. I remember sitting on my dad's lap while he read the Sunday paper and helping my mom grade simple arithmetic tests at the kitchen table. Those moments felt warm, safe, and affirming. I was their first child, and for 2 years I had their undivided attention and love. Then Madison came along. 2 years younger than me, she quickly became the family favorite. It wasn't obvious at first, but as we grew older, the pattern became clear. Madison was naturally outgoing and charismatic. She brought home perfect report cards, won spelling bees, and always seemed to say the right things around adults. I was more reserved, thoughtful, and interested in taking things apart to see how they worked rather than collecting gold stars and trophies. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a familiar refrain in our household. When Madison was accepted into the gifted program in 4th grade, my parents threw a party and invited the entire extended family. When I won the science fair that same year, I got a pat on the back and a good job. The message was subtle but consistent. Madison's achievements mattered more. As we entered high school, the comparisons intensified. Madison joined every club, became class president, and started preparing for Ivy League applications in her freshman year. I found my passion in computer science and spent hours coding in my room. My parents viewed her extracurricular activities as building a future, while my coding was just playing on the computer. When it came time for college decisions, the family dynamics reached a breaking point. Madison was accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship. My parents were ecstatic, telling everyone they knew about their daughter's achievement. I, on the other hand, had been researching alternative paths. The tech industry was changing rapidly, and I saw opportunities that didn't necessarily require a traditional 4-year degree. "I'm thinking about doing a coding boot camp instead of college," I announced at dinner one night. The silence that followed was deafening. My father put down his fork, looking at me as if I'd suggested becoming a professional gambler. "That's not a real education, Mason," he said firmly. "You need a degree to be successful in this world." My mother chimed in with her concerned teacher voice. "Honey, think about your future. What company would hire someone without a college degree?" Madison just smirked across the table, secure in her position as the child who was doing things the right way. Despite their objections, I stuck to my plan. I enrolled in an intensive coding boot camp in Chicago, supporting myself by working nights at a local electronics store. The program was challenging and immersive, and I thrived in the practical, hands-on environment. Within 3 months, I had built a portfolio of projects and was ready to enter the job market. My first position was as a junior developer at a small startup. The pay wasn't great, but the experience was invaluable. I worked directly with the founders, learning not just about coding, but about business, product development, and client relationships. My parents viewed it as a starter job that I would soon outgrow in favor of going back to get a real degree. "It's not too late to apply to community college," my mother would say during our weekly calls. "You could transfer to a 4-year school after getting your basics." Meanwhile, Madison graduated from Princeton with honors and took a position at a marketing firm in Chicago. Her starting salary was higher than mine, a fact my parents often mentioned when discussing our careers. What they didn't understand was that I was building something different, investing in skills and connections that would compound over time. Over the next 5 years, I moved through 3 different companies, each step bringing more responsibility and higher compensation. I relocated to Seattle for a mid-level engineering position at a growing tech company, then was promoted to team lead within 8 months. By the time I was 30, I had been recruited to join a prominent tech company as an engineering director managing a team of 20 developers. Through it all, I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. I lived in a comfortable but not extravagant apartment, drove a practical car, and invested most of my earnings. I never flaunted my success or salary, partly because I valued privacy, and partly because I'd learned early on that my accomplishments would never be enough for my family anyway. Why bother trying to impress them? My parents remained politely interested in my career, but clearly didn't understand what I actually did. "So you're still doing that computer thing?" my dad would ask when we spoke. They seemed to think I was stuck in some entry-level position, perhaps because I didn't brag about promotions or title changes. Madison, meanwhile, had plateaued at her marketing firm but continued to be the golden child, especially after she bought a condo in an upscale Chicago neighborhood that she could barely afford. By 33, I had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Engineering, overseeing several departments with a combined budget of over $50 million and hundreds of employees. I was responsible for critical technology decisions, managed large-scale projects, and reported directly to the C-suite executives. My compensation package had grown substantially, but my lifestyle remained relatively unchanged. I valued financial security and independence over outward displays of wealth. 6 months ago, I personally interviewed and approved the hiring of a promising young developer named Ryan Thompson. He had 3 years of experience and showed excellent problem-solving skills during the technical interviews. He was assigned to one of the teams under my purview, and while we didn't interact daily, he was definitely within my organizational chart. Ryan was talented, but clearly early in his career journey, the kind of person we hired for their potential rather than their existing accomplishments. Meanwhile, Madison's life continued on its carefully curated path. After a series of relationships with men she deemed appropriate in terms of status and income, she had recently started dating someone new. Our parents mentioned him during our occasional family calls, noting how successful and ambitious he was. Madison had always been strategic about her relationships, viewing them as extensions of her personal brand rather than authentic connections. She dated lawyers, doctors, and business executives, often moving on when she found someone with more impressive credentials. "He works at some big tech company," my mother mentioned during one call. "Madison says he's going places fast." I didn't think much of it at the time. Madison had always exaggerated the importance and achievements of her boyfriends. It was part of her ongoing narrative that her life choices were superior to mine. Little did I know that her new relationship would soon bring our parallel lives into direct collision. My mother's 60th birthday was approaching in May. In our family, milestone birthdays had always been celebrated with elaborate gatherings bringing together extended family and close friends. My mother's 50th had been a weekend-long affair at a rented lake house, with catered meals and professionally taken family photos. These celebrations were non-negotiable family events marked on calendars months in advance. 2 months before the big day, my father called to give me the heads up about the upcoming celebration. "We're planning something special for your mother's 60th, he said casually. "Dinner at La Maison on the 15th. Put it on your calendar." La Maison was an upscale French restaurant in downtown Chicago, known for its exclusive atmosphere and excellent cuisine. I immediately made arrangements to fly in from Seattle for the weekend and booked a hotel nearby. I also ordered a custom piece of jewelry for my mother, a necklace with birthstones representing each family member, and arranged for a spa day for her the morning of her birthday. I had attended every important family event despite the distance, flying back to Chicago several times a year to maintain connections. Though our relationships were complicated, family occasions remained sacred in my mind. I'd never missed a milestone birthday, holiday gathering, or significant celebration. Maintaining those traditions felt important even as other aspects of our family dynamic remained strained. The week before the planned celebration, my phone rang with my father's number displayed on the screen. I answered while walking between meetings at the office. "Hey Dad, what's up? I was just finalizing my flight details for next weekend." There was an uncomfortable pause before he spoke. "About that, Mason. We're having a bit of an issue with the reservation at La Maison. Oh, do we need to change the time or date? I asked already, mentally rearranging my schedule to accommodate any changes. Not exactly, he said, his voice unnaturally hesitant. The thing is, the space we reserved is smaller than we initially thought. We're having to cut down the guest list a bit. I stopped walking, standing still in the middle of the corridor as employees passed by. What are you saying, Dad? It might be better if you came to visit another time, he said finally. Maybe the weekend after. We could have a small family dinner then, just the four of us. The implication was clear, but I could hardly believe it. Are you uninviting me from Mom's birthday? Don't think of it that way, he said quickly. We're just postponing your visit. Your mother will get to celebrate twice. I pressed for more information, confused by this sudden change. Who all is coming to the actual birthday dinner then? Another pause. Well, your mother and I, of course. Your Aunt Susan and Uncle Bob. Your cousins. And Madison and her boyfriend. The pieces began to fall into place. So Madison's boyfriend is coming, but I'm being asked not to. My father sighed, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. Madison really wants to introduce him to the family. He's quite successful, you know. Works at some big technology firm in a very important position. And that's relevant because, well, my father continued, his voice, taking on a slightly condescending tone. Madison thought you might feel, well, a bit uncomfortable around him, given your different career paths. She says he's on track for executive leadership, and we know how you feel about your more alternative career choices. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After years of downplaying my career achievements, my family was now explicitly excluding me based on their misconception of my professional status. The irony would have been amusing if it wasn't so hurtful. Let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice even despite the anger building inside me. I'm being uninvited from my own mother's milestone birthday because Madison wants to show off her boyfriend, and you're worried I'll feel inferior to him. Don't be dramatic, Mason, my father said dismissively. It's just one dinner. You can still call your mother on her birthday, and as I said, we can have a nice meal when you visit the following weekend. Has Mom agreed to this arrangement? I asked. She understands the situation, he replied vaguely. Madison has been planning this for weeks. Her boyfriend is very busy, and this was the only weekend he could make it. You know how important first impressions are. The subtext was clear. Madison's boyfriend's schedule and comfort were being prioritized over my presence at a family milestone. The rejection stung deeply, reopening childhood wounds I thought had long healed. And what exactly did Madison tell you about my career? I asked, curious about the narrative my sister had created. Well, we know you do something with computers at some company in Seattle, my father said. Madison mentioned that you're still in a pretty entry-level position. Nothing wrong with that, son. Not everyone climbs the corporate ladder. I almost laughed out loud at the absurdity. In reality, I was responsible for technology decisions affecting millions of users and managing a budget larger than most companies' entire revenue. But correcting this misperception felt pointless. If my family had decided I wasn't successful enough to attend my own mother's birthday, no title or salary figure would change their fundamental lack of respect. I see, I said simply. Well, I wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable with my presence. That's very understanding of you, my father said, sounding relieved that I wasn't putting up more of a fight. Like I said, we'll do something when you visit the following weekend. After hanging up, I stood in the hallway of my office building, processing what had just happened. The rejection brought back every moment of feeling less than in my family's eyes. Every comparison to Madison, every dismissal of my choices, every subtle and not so subtle indication that I wasn't measuring up to their standards. My initial reaction was a mixture of shock and disbelief, followed quickly by a deep, aching hurt. These were the people who were supposed to value me unconditionally, yet they had just explicitly stated that I wasn't welcome at an important family gathering because they perceived me as professionally inferior. Anger followed the hurt. I was tempted to call back and set the record straight to enlighten my father about my actual position and success. I imagined the satisfaction of watching them backpedal and suddenly find space at the table for me, but something stopped me. Would revealing my professional status change anything fundamental about our relationship? Would it make them value me for who I was rather than what I had achieved? I decided to respect their decision while maintaining my dignity. I canceled my flight and hotel reservation and sent a thoughtful gift and flower arrangement to be delivered to my mother on her birthday. I would not force my presence where it wasn't wanted, but neither would I pretend their actions hadn't hurt me deeply. What I didn't yet realize was that this rejection would set in motion a series of events that would expose years of family misconceptions in the most unexpected way. After the phone call with my father, I tried to put the whole situation out of my mind and focus on work. But human curiosity is a powerful force. Despite my best efforts, I found myself wondering about this supposedly impressive boyfriend who had effectively taken my place at the family table. What kind of person was he? What position did he hold that my sister found so impressive? And why did the timing of all this feel oddly coincidental? One evening, after a long day of meetings, I found myself scrolling through Madison's social media profiles. She had always been prolific online, carefully curating an image of success and happiness. Her recent posts featured artfully composed photos of brunches, wine tastings, and cultural events, often with carefully worded captions about living my best life and blessed with success. And there he was appearing in photos from about 2 months ago. A tall man with dark hair and a confident smile, always impeccably dressed in what looked like designer clothes. His arm was around Madison in most shots, and her captions referred to him only as my amazing guy or someone special without tagging or naming him. There was something vaguely familiar about his face, but I couldn't quite place it. In the tech industry in Seattle, you end up crossing paths with thousands of people at conferences, networking events, and industry functions. He could have been someone I'd seen in passing at any number of professional gatherings. I clicked on a clearer photo where he was more prominently featured. Madison had captioned it, "Date Night," with my successful tech executive hide, which made me roll my eyes at her transparent status signaling. But as I studied the image more closely, recognition dawned. No way, I muttered to myself. It couldn't be. I opened my company directory and searched for Ryan Thompson. His professional headshot appeared, immediately confirming my suspicion. Madison's successful boyfriend was none other than the developer I had hired 6 months ago. The irony was almost too perfect. My sister was dating someone who reported up through several layers of management to me. Ryan was talented and promising, but he was 3 years into his career and nowhere near executive leadership. He was a mid-level developer with potential, exactly the kind of person my family would have dismissed as having an alternative career path if he had been my friend rather than Madison's boyfriend. I pulled up Ryan's employment file to confirm what I already knew. He had joined our company 6 months ago after completing a computer science degree and working at 2 smaller firms. His performance reviews were positive, but noted that he was still developing his skills in several areas. His salary, while competitive for his experience level, was a fraction of mine, and most importantly, he was organizationally positioned 4 levels below me in the company hierarchy. This discovery presented an ethical dilemma. As a senior executive, I needed to maintain professional boundaries and avoid conflicts of interest. Ryan's personal life was his own business, and he had every right to date whomever he chose. The fact that he was dating my sister without knowing our connection was not his fault. I considered whether Ryan knew who I was. Given that he'd never mentioned the connection, and that Madison apparently had no idea what I actually did for a living, it seemed unlikely. Our company had thousands of employees, and while people in the engineering department certainly knew who I was, they didn't necessarily know details about my personal life or family background. The question now was how to handle this situation. I could immediately disclose the connection to both Ryan and Madison, potentially causing workplace awkwardness and family drama. I could recuse myself from any decisions affecting Ryan's employment, addressing the potential conflict of interest, or I could wait and see how the situation developed, particularly since it appeared neither Ryan nor Madison knew about the connection. I decided on the third option, at least temporarily. I would maintain professional boundaries at work while observing how things unfolded. If Ryan and Madison's relationship became serious, I would need to address the potential conflict of interest. but for now there was no immediate action required from a professional standpoint. What fascinated me more was what this coincidence revealed about Madison's character. She had clearly exaggerated Ryan's position and importance to impress our parents, continuing her lifelong pattern of prioritizing appearances over authenticity. She had also deemed him important enough to exclude her own brother from a family celebration, all to maintain her carefully constructed narrative of dating someone impressively successful. I wondered if Ryan knew how he was being presented to my family. Did he realize he was being marketed as an executive on a fast track to leadership? Was he actively participating in this exaggeration, or was he an unwitting prop in Madison's status games? For a moment, I considered reaching out to Ryan directly to discuss the situation, but that would potentially create an uncomfortable dynamic at work. Ryan might feel his job was at risk if he continued dating my sister, or he might think I was trying to intimidate him. Neither outcome would be fair to him or conducive to a healthy workplace. Instead, I decided to let events unfold naturally. My mother's birthday was only a few days away. I would send my gift, make a polite call to wish her happy birthday, and continue with my life. If Madison wanted to create fictional narratives about her boyfriend's success, that was her choice. Reality had a way of eventually asserting itself. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly and dramatically that reality would make itself known. The morning of my mother's 60th birthday, I arranged for a large bouquet of her favorite flowers to be delivered to their home, along with the custom necklace I had ordered weeks earlier. I included a heartfelt card expressing my love and appreciation for her, making no mention of the dinner I had been uninvited from. I wanted her day to be special regardless of the hurtful circumstances. I spent the day focused on work, trying not to dwell on the fact that my family was gathering without me. I had scheduled several important meetings to keep myself occupied and planned to stay late at the office reviewing quarterly projections. Immersing myself in work had always been my method for processing emotional challenges. Around noon, my mother called to thank me for the gifts. "The necklace is beautiful, Mason," she said, her voice warm but tinged with something that sounded like guilt. "I love having all our birthstones together. It means so much." "I'm glad you like it, Mom. Happy birthday." There was a pause before she continued. "I wish you were here to celebrate with us." "Me too," I said, simply not wanting to make her feel worse on her special day. "Your father mentioned you'll be visiting next weekend instead," she asked hopefully. "We'll see," I replied non-committally. "I've got some work commitments coming up that might make travel difficult." Another pause. "Madison's boyfriend is joining us tonight. He seems very nice. Works at a big tech company like you do." I bit back the urge to ask if she knew which company or what he actually did there. Instead, I just said, "That's great, Mom. I hope you have a wonderful dinner." "It won't be the same without you," she said softly. The conversation ended shortly after leaving me with mixed emotions. My mother clearly felt conflicted about my absence, but not enough to have insisted on my inclusion. I wondered if she truly understood the reason I had been uninvited, or if my father and Madison had presented her with a different narrative. As the evening progressed, I found myself unable to resist checking social media for updates on the celebration. Sure enough, Madison had already posted several photos from the pre-dinner gathering at our parents' house. There she was, in an expensive-looking dress, standing proudly next to Ryan, who was wearing a suit that I recognized as mid-range designer wear. Our parents beamed beside them, looking every bit the proud family. The caption read, "Celebrating Mom's 60th with the people who matter most. So proud to introduce Ryan to the family. They're already obsessed with my amazing tech executive boyfriend, Keepley A." I zoomed in on my parents' faces, noting how they gazed at Ryan with unmistakable approval, the kind of approval they had rarely, if ever, directed toward me. My father had his impressed expression on the slightly raised eyebrows and firm handshake that signaled male respect. My mother was touching Ryan's arm in the familiar gesture she reserved for people she wanted to make feel especially welcome. More photos appeared throughout the evening. The group arriving at La Maison, champagne toasts at the table, my mother opening gifts, Ryan apparently holding court with some story that had everyone laughing. The narrative was clear: this was the perfect family celebration with the perfect successful boyfriend. My absence wasn't even acknowledged. I put my phone away and tried to focus on the budget spreadsheet open on my laptop, but concentration was difficult. Despite years of building my own life and success, there was still a part of me that yearned for my family's recognition and approval. Seeing them so easily replace me with someone they deemed more impressive reopened wounds I thought had long healed. Around 9 o'clock, my phone lit up with a video call from my mother. I hesitated before answering, but decided it would be petty to ignore her on her birthday. "Hey, Mom, how's the celebration going?" I asked, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "Wonderful. We're just having dessert," she replied, her face flushed with happiness and perhaps a few glasses of wine. "I wanted to call so you could say hello to everyone." The camera panned around the private dining room at La Maison. I could see my father raising his glass in acknowledgement, my aunt and uncle waving, and cousins I hadn't seen in years smiling awkwardly at the phone. Madison was visible at the far end of the table, looking annoyed at the interruption. Ryan sat beside her, his back to the camera. "We miss having you here, son." My father called out, his voice carrying the artificial joviality he adopted in social situations. "How's that apartment of yours still in the same place?" "Yes, same place," I replied, not bothering to correct his assumption that I lived in some small starter apartment. In reality, I owned a spacious condo in one of Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods, but explaining that seemed pointless. "And work?" "Still doing that computer stuff," he continued, reinforcing his perception of my career as some vague technical hobby rather than a professional achievement. "Still in tech, yes," I said simply. My mother turned the camera back to herself. "Mason has sent me the most beautiful necklace with all our birthstones," she told everyone at the table. "Wasn't that thoughtful?" I could hear Madison's voice off camera. "That's nice. Ryan got Mom those designer earrings she's been wanting for ages, the ones from that exclusive boutique." My mother looked slightly uncomfortable but quickly recovered. "Yes, those too. I'm being absolutely spoiled today." She turned the camera again, this time panning slowly across the table. "Everyone say hello to Mason." As the camera moved past different family members, I nodded and smiled appropriately. Then it reached Madison and Ryan. Madison was whispering something in Ryan's ear, and he was nodding while reaching for his water glass. As the camera settled on them, Ryan looked up directly into the frame. The moment of recognition was instantaneous and unmistakable. Ryan's eyes widened and he choked slightly on his water. He quickly composed himself but couldn't hide his shock. "Mr. Richards," he said incredulously. Then, as professional instinct took over, he straightened in his chair and added, "Hello, boss." The silence that followed was deafening. The camera shakily turned back to my mother's confused face. "Boss," she repeated, looking from the phone to something off camera and back again. "What do you mean, boss?" I could hear Madison's sharp whisper. "What are you talking about, Ryan?" Ryan's voice came through clearly, sounding bewildered. "That's Mason Richards. He's the senior VP of engineering. My boss's boss." Another silence then, a cacophony of confused voices. The camera shook as it was apparently set down or passed around. I could see the ceiling of the restaurant briefly, then quick glimpses of shocked family faces. Madison's voice cut through the chaos, high-pitched with disbelief. "That's impossible. Mason works some entry-level tech job in Seattle." Entry-level? Ryan's voice sounded genuinely confused. "Mr. Richards oversees the entire engineering division. He's one of the most senior executives in the company." My father's face suddenly appeared in frame, closer than necessary to the camera. "Mason, is this true? Are you this young man's superior at work?" I nodded calmly. "Ryan was hired about 6 months ago. He's a talented developer on one of our engineering teams." "But you never said," my father began. "You never asked," I replied simply. The video call abruptly ended. Whether intentionally or accidentally, someone had hung up. I sat back in my office chair, processing what had just happened. The carefully constructed narrative about my career and success that my family had maintained for years had just collapsed in the most public and unexpected way possible. My phone immediately began buzzing with text messages. From my father, "Call me immediately. We need to talk about this." From my mother, Mason. I'm so confused. Please explain what's happening. From Madison. How dare you humiliate me like this? I set my phone aside, not ready to engage with any of them yet. The truth had finally emerged, but not by my design or choice. Now I needed to decide how to handle the fallout both personally and professionally. The next 24 hours brought a barrage of communications from my family. My phone filled with missed calls, voicemails, and text messages. I read and listened to them all, but decided to take time before responding. After years of being misunderstood and undervalued, I felt I deserved space to process my own feelings before managing theirs. My father's messages evolved from demanding explanations to offering awkward apologies. I don't understand why you never told us about your position, his first voicemail began accusingly. By the fifth message, his tone had shifted. Son, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. We need to talk about this as a family. My mother's communications were more emotional. I feel terrible about what happened, she said, her voice tearful. I never would have agreed to you not being at my birthday if I'd known. Well, everything. Please call me back, Mason. I need to hear your voice. Madison's messages were the most revealing. Initially hostile, she accused me of deliberately embarrassing her. You could have told me you knew Ryan. You set this whole thing up to make me look stupid. When I didn't respond, her tactics changed. Look, maybe I exaggerated a little about Ryan's position, but you could have corrected me privately instead of humiliating me in front of the entire family. By morning, I also had an email from Ryan in my work account. Mr. Richards, I want to sincerely apologize for the awkward situation last night. I had no idea Madison was your sister. She never mentioned her brother by name, only saying he worked in tech in Seattle. I never connected the dots. I want to assure you that this will not affect our professional relationship or my commitment to the company. I understand if you feel there's a conflict of interest, and I'm open to discussing any concerns you might have. Respectfully, Ryan Thompson. The email was professional and appropriate, which I appreciated. It confirmed my suspicion that Ryan had been an unwitting participant in Madison's status games, rather than actively misrepresenting himself. I responded briefly, assuring him that his position was not in jeopardy, and that we would discuss the situation in person when appropriate. I emphasized that he should continue focusing on his work without concern about personal complications. After giving myself a full day to reflect, I decided to address each family member individually, starting with Madison. I called her that evening, bracing myself for a difficult conversation. She answered immediately. Finally, do you have any idea what you've done? Hello to you too, Madison, I replied calmly. I think we need to talk about what happened. You humiliated me, she exclaimed. Ryan hasn't returned my calls since the dinner. You've probably fired him or threatened him or something. I haven't spoken to Ryan outside of a brief email assuring him his job is secure, I said. And I didn't humiliate you, Madison. Your own actions did that. What is that supposed to mean? It means you've been telling our family that Ryan is some high-powered tech executive when you know perfectly well he's early in his career. You created a fiction that fell apart when reality intervened. There was a pause before Madison responded, her voice defensive. I never specifically said he was an executive. I just said he was successful and going places. According to Dad, you told them he was on track for executive leadership and suggested I would feel uncomfortable around someone more successful than me. Those were deliberate misrepresentations. Another pause, longer this time. Fine, she finally admitted. I may have implied he was more senior than he is, but that's only because... Because what? Because that's what matters to Mom and Dad, she exclaimed. You know how they are. They've always measured success by titles and prestige. I was just giving them what they wanted to hear. At my expense, I pointed out. You used these exaggerations as justification to have me excluded from Mom's birthday. I didn't think you'd care that much, she said, her voice smaller now. You've always been so independent, doing your own thing regardless of what the family thinks. Being independent doesn't mean I don't care about being included in important family events, Madison, or that it doesn't hurt to be explicitly rejected because I'm deemed not successful enough. Well, apparently that was all wrong anyway, she said bitterly. You've been hiding your big important job from us all these years. Were you just waiting for a moment like this to show us all up? I took a deep breath, recognizing the deflection tactic for what it was. I never hid anything. I simply stopped trying to correct the narrative that you and our parents created. You all decided long ago that my path wasn't valuable or impressive, so I stopped seeking your validation. So you're saying this is all our fault? Madison asked defensively. I'm saying we all contributed to a family dynamic where authenticity was sacrificed for appearances and where success was defined so narrowly that we couldn't see or appreciate each other's actual achievements. The conversation continued in circles for another 20 minutes. Madison alternated between defensive justifications and reluctant admissions of fault. By the end, we had reached an uneasy truce rather than a true resolution. Years of competitive dynamics couldn't be resolved in a single phone call. For what it's worth, Madison said before hanging up, Ryan really did talk about how much he respected his boss's boss's boss. I just never imagined that person was you. The irony wasn't lost on me. All these years, my family had been dismissing my career while I had been building a reputation for leadership and excellence among my peers and colleagues. It was a stark reminder that external validation, especially from family, wasn't a reliable measure of actual achievement. Next, I scheduled a video call with Ryan to address the personal and professional boundaries of our unexpected connection. He appeared on screen looking nervous, his usual confidence subdued. Thank you for making time for this conversation, Mr. Richards, he began formally. Under the circumstances, I think you can call me Mason when we're discussing personal matters, I offered. Though in professional contexts, we should maintain appropriate boundaries. Ryan nodded, visibly relieving. I want to assure you that I had no idea about the connection. Madison mentioned having a brother in tech in Seattle, but never by name. I never made the connection. I believe you, I assured him. And I want to be clear that your position at the company is not affected by this situation. Your work will continue to be evaluated on its own merits. Thank you, he said sincerely. I'm extremely uncomfortable with how I was positioned in your family situation. I never claimed to be an executive or anything close to it. I understand that too, I said. Madison has a history of enhancing the status of people in her life. That's not your responsibility. We discussed practical considerations, agreeing that our work interactions would remain strictly professional and that we would disclose the connection to HR to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. I also made it clear that I wouldn't be involved in his performance reviews or promotion decisions going forward. If I may ask, Ryan said hesitantly, as our conversation was wrapping up, has this situation affected your relationship with your sister? I considered the question carefully. Our relationship has been complicated for many years. This is just the latest chapter in a longer story. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, she speaks very highly of you when it's just the two of us. I think there's a lot of admiration underneath the competition. His observation surprised me, offering a perspective on Madison I hadn't considered. Perhaps there was more complexity to her feelings than I had recognized. With the most immediate conversations handled, I turned my attention to my parents. After several exchanges of messages, we agreed to meet for dinner the following weekend at a restaurant in Chicago. I flew in on Saturday morning, bracing myself for what promised to be an emotionally charged reunion. The restaurant my parents selected for our meeting was an upscale steakhouse in downtown Chicago, the kind of establishment designed to impress business clients with its dark wood paneling and attentive service. I arrived 15 minutes early and was seated at a corner table that offered some privacy for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. My parents entered the restaurant exactly on time, my father scanning the room with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to business dinners, my mother looking more tentative beside him. I stood to greet them, noting the unusual uncertainty in their expressions. Typically, my father projected confidence, bordering on arrogance, while my mother maintained a pleasant social mask, regardless of the situation. Today, both looked genuinely unsettled. Mason, my father said, extending his hand formally, before pulling me into an awkward half-hug. Thank you for making time to see us. My mother embraced me more naturally, holding on a beat longer than usual. "It's good to see you, sweetheart," she said softly. We settled into our seats, and an uncomfortable silence descended as we studied our menus with unnecessary concentration. After the waiter took our orders and brought drinks, my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Son, I owe you an apology," he began, his voice carrying the slightly rehearsed quality of a prepared statement. "What happened at your mother's birthday was unfortunate, and I take responsibility for my role in it." I nodded but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I should have questioned Madison's characterization of the situation more thoroughly," he continued, "and I should never have suggested you miss your mother's birthday celebration." "But why did you accept her framing so easily?" I asked. "Why was it so believable to you that I would be intimidated by someone supposedly more successful?" My father looked uncomfortable. "You've always been difficult to read when it comes to your career. You never talk about promotions or accomplishments. You live modestly. You don't seem to care about the markers of success that most people value. And that made you assume I wasn't successful." "I wouldn't put it that way," he hedged. "We just didn't have a clear picture of what you were doing professionally." "You never asked," I pointed out. "Not in any meaningful way. Still doing that computer thing isn't exactly showing interest in my career." My mother interjected, tears forming in her eyes. "We didn't understand what you did, Mason. All those technical terms and company names meant nothing to us. Madison's path was easier to comprehend and share with friends. So because my career didn't make for easy conversation at your social gatherings, you decided it wasn't worth understanding." "That's not fair," my father protested. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "When Madison got her marketing job out of college, you learned every detail of her company and position so you could brag about it to your friends. You never made that effort with me." My father started to object, then stopped, considering my words. "I suppose there's some truth to that," he admitted reluctantly. "The issue isn't just about what happened at Mom's birthday," I continued. "It's about a pattern that's existed our entire lives. Madison follows the path you understand and approve of, so she gets recognition and support. I choose a different route, so my achievements are minimized or ignored. We've always been proud of you both," my mother insisted, wiping away a tear. "Have you?" I asked gently. "Or have you been proud of Madison and tolerant of me?" The question hung in the air as our appetizers arrived. We ate in silence for a few minutes, each processing the uncomfortable truths being surfaced. I think my father said finally that we may have had a narrow definition of success, one that was shaped by our own experiences and limitations. It was perhaps the most self-aware statement I'd ever heard from him, and it caught me by surprise. When I was coming up in the insurance business, he continued, success had clear markers: the corner office, the title on the door, the company car. These were things everyone understood and respected. He looked at me directly. "Your path didn't have those familiar signposts, so I didn't know how to evaluate it or explain it to others. So instead of learning, you dismissed it," I concluded. He nodded slowly. "I think that's fair, and I was wrong to do so." My mother reached across the table to take my hand. "When we saw how Ryan reacted to you on that video call, it was like suddenly seeing you through someone else's eyes. The respect in his voice when he called you boss. It made us realize how little we knew about your actual life." "I never needed you to be impressed by my title or salary," I said. "I just wanted you to respect my choices and be interested in my journey, even if it didn't follow the conventional path you understood." "We should have done better," my father acknowledged, "and I'm truly sorry we didn't." As our main courses arrived, the conversation shifted to more specific questions about my actual role and responsibilities. For perhaps the first time, my parents listened attentively as I explained my position, the scope of my authority, and the projects my teams were working on. They asked thoughtful follow-up questions and seemed genuinely interested in understanding my professional world. "Why didn't you ever correct our misperceptions?" my mother asked eventually. "You must have known we didn't understand your actual position." I considered the question carefully. At first I tried, but my achievements were always compared unfavorably to Madison's more traditional path. Eventually I stopped seeking your validation and focused on building a career that satisfied me regardless of whether you understood or appreciated it. And we reinforced that by continuing to misunderstand and undervalue your choices, my father said, showing a level of insight I hadn't expected. Yes, I agreed. It became a cycle. The less you valued my path, the less I shared about it. The less I shared, the less you understood. And so on. I wish we could go back and do things differently, my mother said sadly. We can't change the past, I replied, but we can set better patterns for the future. As the meal progressed, we began discussing what those new patterns might look like. I was clear about my expectations going forward, genuine interest in my life and career, respect for my choices even when they differed from their expectations, and fair treatment compared to Madison. No more excluding me from family events based on perceived status, I said firmly. No more dismissing my career as that computer thing. No more comparing my choices unfavorably to Madison's. My parents agreed to these terms, though I could see my father struggling with some of the implicit criticism of his past behavior. Pride had always been his weakness, and acknowledging failures didn't come easily to him. And what about Madison, my mother asked cautiously. How do we help repair that relationship? Madison and I have our own issues to work through, I said. But you can help by not enabling or rewarding her competitive behavior. Don't let her use status or accomplishments as currency for preferential treatment. By the time dessert arrived, the atmosphere had lightened considerably. There was a tentative optimism in our conversation, a sense that perhaps this painful episode could lead to healthier family dynamics. My father even made a self-deprecating joke about his technological cluelessness, a small but significant acknowledgement of his limitations. We're proud of you, son, he said as we prepared to leave. Not because of your title or success, but because of the man you've become despite our shortcomings as parents. It was perhaps the most genuine and meaningful compliment he had ever given me, and I felt its impact deeply. This dinner wouldn't instantly heal years of misunderstanding and hurt, but it was a meaningful first step toward a more authentic relationship. As we parted outside the restaurant, my mother hugged me tightly. "Will you come for Thanksgiving?" she asked hopefully. "The whole family together." "Let's take it one step at a time," I replied, not wanting to make promises I wasn't sure I could keep, but I'm open to trying. As I watched them walk away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Cautious hope for our future relationship, lingering hurt from past patterns, and pride in having finally spoken my truth clearly and directly. Whether this conversation would lead to lasting change remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, I felt the possibility of a more authentic connection with my parents. In the months following our family confrontation, gradual but meaningful changes began to take shape in our relationships. My parents made visible efforts to engage more authentically with my life and career. My father subscribed to several tech industry newsletters, occasionally sending me articles with questions that showed genuine interest. My mother initiated weekly video calls that focused on my day-to-day experiences rather than achievement milestones. These small gestures of attention and care began healing wounds that had festered for decades. When my father asked thoughtful questions about a project I mentioned, or my mother remembered the name of a colleague I'd spoken about previously, I felt seen in a way that had been rare in our family dynamic. The shift wasn't always smooth or consistent. Old habits occasionally resurfaced, particularly when extended family gatherings triggered my parents' ingrained desire to showcase their children's accomplishments. But now, when they slipped into comparative language or status-focused comments, they caught themselves more quickly and redirected the conversation. My relationship with Madison remained more complicated. After our initial confrontation, we limited communication to brief surface-level exchanges during family calls. The competitive dynamic that had defined our relationship since childhood couldn't be dismantled overnight, and we both needed time to establish new patterns of interaction. 3 months after the birthday incident, Madison reached out to suggest meeting for coffee during my next visit to Chicago. I agreed, curious about her initiative but cautious about expectations. We met at a quiet cafe in Lincoln Park, away from family or familiar acquaintances. Madison arrived punctually, looking polished as always, but with a subdued demeanor unusual for her typically confident presence. "Thanks for meeting me," she began, after we'd ordered. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened." "So have I acknowledged." She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger, gathering her thoughts. "Ryan and I broke up," she said finally. "It wasn't working." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied sincerely. "Don't be. It was for the best." She looked up at me directly. "He wasn't who I was pretending he was, and I wasn't who he thought I was either." "What do you mean?" "After everything came out about your position, Ryan started asking more questions about me, about my career, my goals, my actual achievements, rather than how I presented them." She gave a rueful smile. "Turns out he valued authenticity more than status. He said he'd rather date someone genuinely passionate about their work than someone focused on appearances." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Madison had selected Ryan partly for his perceived status value, only to discover he didn't share her prioritization of external validation. "It made me think about how much energy I've spent crafting an image instead of building a meaningful life," she continued, "and how much of our relationship as siblings has been poisoned by competition." That's a significant realization, I observed, impressed by her self-awareness. "Don't get too excited," she said with a flash of her old sharpness. "I'm not completely reformed, but I am trying to be more honest with myself and with others." We spent the next 2 hours in the most genuine conversation we'd had as adults. Madison acknowledged how our parents' tendency to compare us had shaped her need for validation and recognition. I admitted that my withdrawal from family approval had sometimes manifested as smugness or superiority. "Do you think we can ever have a normal sibling relationship?" she asked as we prepared to leave. "I don't know about normal," I replied honestly, "but maybe we can build something healthier than what we've had." "I'd like to try," she said, and for once I believed her sincerity. Meanwhile, at work, my unexpected connection to Ryan had required some professional navigation. Following our initial conversation, we met with HR to disclose the personal relationship and establish appropriate boundaries. I recused myself from decisions directly affecting his employment, and we maintained strictly professional interactions in the workplace. Despite the awkward circumstances, Ryan continued to perform well, and eventually transferred to a different department, where any perceived conflict of interest was further minimized. We occasionally encountered each other at company events, exchanging polite but distant greetings that acknowledged our complicated connection without dwelling on it. 6 months after the birthday revelation, I received news of a significant promotion. The company was restructuring its leadership, and I was offered a position on the executive leadership team reporting directly to the CEO. The role represented a substantial increase in responsibility, compensation, and visibility within the organization. When I called my parents to share the news, their reaction was markedly different from what it would have been a year earlier. "That's wonderful, Mason," my father said warmly. "Tell me about what the new position involves." Rather than immediately comparing my achievement to some benchmark or asking about the superficial trappings of success, he listened attentively as I explained the scope and challenges of the new role. My mother asked thoughtful questions about how I felt about the promotion and what aspects excited me most. The conversation affirmed the progress we'd made in our relationship. They were celebrating my success on my terms, interested in the substance of my achievement, rather than how it looked to others, or how it compared to some arbitrary standard. "We're having a small dinner next weekend to celebrate Mom's retirement," my father mentioned as the call was wrapping up. "Nothing fancy, just family. We'd love to have you there if you can make it." The casual, genuine invitation stood in stark contrast to the painful exclusion I'd experienced less than a year before. "I'll be there," I promised, and meant it. Beyond the changes in my family relationships, the experience had prompted deeper personal reflection about validation, success, and authenticity. For years, I had claimed to be unbothered by my family's lack of recognition, focusing instead on internal measures of achievement. But the pain of being excluded from my mother's birthday had revealed that I still craved their approval more than I had admitted to myself. This realization led me to examine other areas where I might be seeking external validation while pretending to be above such concerns. At work, was I truly motivated by the impact of my contributions, or was I still unconsciously chasing titles and recognition? In friendships, was I authentic about my needs and boundaries, or was I performing a role I thought would be valued? These questions pushed me toward greater honesty with myself and others. I began building a community of friends who valued authenticity over appearances, people with whom I could share both successes and struggles without fear of judgment. Some colleagues became genuine friends, as I allowed more of my true self to emerge in professional contexts. I also found unexpected fulfillment in mentoring younger professionals, particularly those following unconventional career paths similar to my own. Helping them navigate challenges and recognize their own value became deeply satisfying, perhaps, because it allowed me to provide the validation and support I had lacked early in my career. The journey toward healing family relationships continued with steps forward and occasional setbacks. During one family gathering, Madison slipped into her old competitive patterns, making a pointed comment about her recent promotion. But instead of responding defensively or withdrawing, I simply acknowledged her achievement with genuine congratulations. The moment passed without escalating into our familiar toxic dynamic, a small but significant victory. My parents, too, sometimes reverted to old behaviors, particularly when stressed or around certain relatives who triggered their status concerns. But now, when it happened, we had developed the language and trust to address it directly rather than allowing resentment to build silently. As I reflected on the entirety of this journey one evening, sitting on the balcony of my Seattle condo with a view of the city lights, I recognized the profound lesson at its core. Respect and recognition should never be conditional on status or conformity to others' expectations. True connection comes from being valued for who you authentically are, not for titles, achievements, or external markers of success. My family had needed the shock of discovering my professional position to recognize their flawed value system, but the meaningful change came not from them finally seeing me as successful by their standards. It came from their beginning to understand that their standards themselves had been misguided, prioritizing appearance over substance and comparison over appreciation. For my part, I had learned that while independence is valuable, completely disconnecting from family approval had been partly a defense mechanism rather than a healthy boundary. True strength came not from pretending not to care about my family's opinion, but from caring enough to engage honestly about how their treatment affected me and what I needed from our relationship going forward. The road ahead would undoubtedly contain more challenges and moments of regression. Patterns established over decades don't dissolve entirely in a matter of months. But we had taken the crucial first steps toward more authentic connections based on acceptance rather than achievement, appreciation rather than comparison. As I watched the sunset over the Seattle skyline, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for much of my adult life. Not because my family now recognized my professional success, but because we were beginning to recognize each other's inherent worth beyond any external measures. Have you ever had family members judge you based on their own narrow definition of success? What did you do to handle that situation? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember that true success isn't measured by titles or status, but by authenticity and meaningful connections. Thanks for listening, and I hope this story helps you navigate your own family relationships with more understanding and self-compassion.